Government Operations and Ordinance Committee. Let the record note that I, David Bounds, and Councilor Bruce Cheney from Ward 1 are here. That constitutes a quorum. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. We're here to consider the petition for motorcycle noise reduction on Scenic Road that was presented first to Councilor Cheney and then to the full council, resulting in this meeting at this time. I guess I'm going to comment first. Please don't take this in any way. But this presents some difficult issues for me, and it does so because Laconia has been home to Motorcycle Week or Weekend or the Motorcycle Rally for decades, 100 years or something like that. It's been doing Motorcycle Week since the 1990s. Scenic Road has always been a much-traveled thoroughfare during the Motorcycle Week rally. That having been said, I'm going to ask the city manager if he can just sort of bring us up to date in terms of some of the specific requests that are made, suggested solutions appearing at page 2.
Before that, could I make a comment?
Sure.
First of all, I don't think, and these folks obviously can speak for themselves, but I don't think this refers just to Motorcycle Week or that event. The second thing I want to say is more important, for me at least, and that is that I asked the folks from that area to not bring 50 people down here, that we could work on this with a smaller group who perhaps could better prepare themselves to make their point. The point I'm trying to make is this is not a scarce group, a very small group that has interest in this. They actually represent quite a few people, but it was my request that they didn't, again, flood the place. So with that.
I appreciate that, and I don't want anybody to have the idea that I'm not looking for solutions or that you folks don't have real concerns and grievances with respect to this matter. I'm not saying that at all. So let's try this again. I'm going to let the city manager just sort of give us an overview of where we are in terms of solutions and that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Councilor. Again, having received this petition a few weeks back, Councilor Cheney brought it to my attention as well as the council's attention. I've asked Chief Canfield to be here tonight, as well as we've got our Public Works Director, Wes Anderson, regarding anything signage and what we can do there type of stuff. Generally speaking, I understand the concerns. There are some significant challenges in trying to enact an ordinance, and then also the enforcement end of it. I'll let the chief speak to on it. Certainly, signage is within our purview and could be addressed. I do know some of the background materials spoke about having the proper equipment for monitoring motorcycle noise and the calibrating of it. And it is true, there is equipment that's out there, and you do need specific training on it. Something that's changed through the courts over the recent, I want to say, 10 years, maybe a little bit less, is it's no longer allowable to pull over motorcycles strictly just on a potential noise infraction. And that may have been the case years prior to that. But a motorcyclist would have to be pulled over for another reason, another moving violation or some other violation, and then something could be applied to it. But then the challenge there is having the equipment on site, having the person who's certified to do that, that particular officer type of thing, because it is a specialty. My understanding, and I'll have the chief corroborate this, but I believe it was state police who used to do some of these checkpoints, similar to like they might have done DWI patrols back in the day. And they had specific officers at specific locations with the equipment. And again, that is what the courts have said, no longer just doing those types of things. So, in just general sense, shared this petition with legal counsel, again, without seeing anything in writing, more of a 10,000-foot level. They thought there could be some challenges that you could treat motorcycles different as far as accessing certain roads. You certainly, if you have noise ordinances, they need to be enforced equally across everything, whether it's vehicles or homeowners or businesses or whatever it might be. So just kind of throwing that out there while the council works through this, and we can certainly see where we go and take the appropriate steps.
Okay, thank you. I'm going, before we get into just taking input from the petitioners and members of the public who want to do that, I'm going to ask Chief Canfield if he could address us with respect to some of the enforcement issues that we might be facing.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Manager, I think you're absolutely correct as far as the enforcement goes. We used to do the noise checks with state police routinely during Motorcycle Week. We used to do the checkpoints. That was ruled illegal, and we can't do those any longer by using the noise decibel meters. As far as sobriety checkpoints, we can't do those either. Those were ruled illegal as well. So what we do is we do saturation patrol. So we'll put a number of officers in a certain area. We could certainly work on that. Certainly areas of Watson and Scenic, we could look at doing some signage. I know one of the things in the petition was talked about enforcement during Motorcycle Week. I think we can certainly ramp that up and do a little bit more as that is concerned as well.
Has enforcement been creating a problem, or we've had issues with enforcement during recent motorcycle weeks, or do you understand my question? Because I had been blithely moving along with the idea that we were doing a pretty good job of enforcement during Motorcycle Week on the whole. That was my impression with the cooperation of the fire department, the police department, and other members of the forces that we bring in here from Motorcycle Week.
Yeah, you're correct in that. I guess my point in saying that was that we can meet with representatives or anyone who has specific concerns, and if there's specific areas, we can address those. We do a good job on Scenic and Watson Road because some years we do have significant accidents at that corner, other years we don't. So we do recognize that, at that part of the strip where there are issues, we do tend to focus more resources.
Well, if it became a request or an issue, I'm sure that somebody from the city or from the police department would be more than willing to meet with any of these folks living up there on the Spindleview, the Tombstone, living up on Scenic Road. I'm sure, and I extend that invitation on your behalf and on the city's behalf to all of those folks.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for the record, welcome Andrew Hosmer, Councilor from Ward 6.
Thank you, Councilor Bounds. It's great to be here. Apologies for being late.
Hey, I'd be apologizing all the time, so. Okay, with that brief introduction, I'd be glad to hear from anybody who would like to express their view about the petition for motorcycle noise reduction on Scenic Watson Road. If you'd stand up and just tell us your name, please.
Yes. My name is Pete Winner, W-I-N-N-E-R. I live at 616 Scenic Road, the Bluegill Lodge, which is a condominium complex. And so there's that complex comprises of townhouses, 24 condos, there's 27 townhouses. And then on the Solil Mountain, as part of the same development, there's 129 lots and 40 houses up there as well. and there's room for expansion for the townhouses as well as for the condos. So I think that that giving a little background of our particular area, our subject is the Meredith Bay, development, or with Meredith Bay, the concerns for the safety and the noise levels that we have on the road. So it's not necessarily for Bike Week like we're talking about. It's on and off all the way through the summer.
Okay.
So that's just that was a good point, Councilman, that you brought up earlier. So as I said, we have the townhouse. On the safety side, our real issue is unsafe bike operation. Speeds, because of where we are with them coming down the hill. Tandem bikes pulling over into opposite lanes. That's happened several times in the last 4 or 5 days. And with where we have recreational facilities on that road, we have a lot of families that are walking along that road. So remember, Counselor, where we are, we have a thing called Kayak Cove. So people have to walk down the road to get there. And so with high speeds coming down the hill or coming the other way up the hill, it can surprise people drastically. And we had a near miss this last week with a bike that was decided to go left right around the car turning right. So there's we have a little bit of that happens. Also, too, further down the road, we have a lot of residences that are down there. There's a lot of cars, a lot of people on the road as well during the summer with a lot of young kids. And that's just after the big corner where they had some of the accidents before. So that's another
Talking
concern.
about the corner at Scenic and Watson Road.
That's correct. It's just down from there.
Yeah.
And if you're going down towards Weirs Beach, you'll see in there's quite often cars and people going down to Lake Winnipesaukee they have a beach down there. The other area is noise. During Bike Week, really a lot of us do wind up leaving town during Bike Week just because of the noise, and it does mean a lot for the area, but the other times of the summer, it can be really obtrusive to us. Just the other night, somebody at 10 o'clock at night was popping a wheelie going up the hill at 10 o'clock at night, and then did the same thing coming the other way down the hill. So that happens frequently, so we have a lot of that's out there. Then we have the rapid acceleration, deceleration, and to the point that many of us cannot sit on our decks because of the noise, anywhere from 5 o'clock until about midnight. Some of us can't even sit in our living rooms and have guests because of the noise, so we have to go back to our den. And there's several people that can't sleep in their master bedroom. They have to go to the guest room, which is the backside of the facility. So it's a very obtrusive noise. That's why we try to think of some options that were out there, some that would be simpler to put into place right away, but just bring some ideas to the council that we could work with you on to try to work through. So we're very open to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to be heard? I'll ask Wes to just, what's the speed limit out there? What can we do for signage?
The speed limit's 30 miles an hour from the point you come past the intersection by Aqua Marina and when you turn off of Endicott Street East. And it's posted at the transition points. And there's one as you're coming down Scenic towards Watson. There's another one, I want to say about a fifth of a mile, quarter of a mile beyond the Aquamarine piece. That's what the posted speed limit is. The challenge is if anyone's going over that, it's really not a signage problem that I can solve that way. When you come up to the Watson Scenic intersection, we have the early warning sign of a sharp curve, and we did our analysis on it, and it's posted 30 for the safety portion of making the corner. It's posted for 25 miles an hour. Doesn't have to be posted by the manual, which is our Bible for signage, but you didn't prohibit us from doing it. So we now have a 25-mile-an-hour placard underneath the curve sign to warn people that's what you should be taking that curve at. And that's really how we have it signed right now.
What would be the cost, and maybe the chief would know this better than you, but I don't know, what would be the cost of putting in, you know, you see them all the time, speed limit's 30, you're doing 40, your speed is 40, is that cost prohibitive?
I don't handle that one. I know you have one already. The portable? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly an option. You know, I think the problem with the electronic signboards is people get used to it. You know, whereas putting it there sporadically and then doing enforcement behind that sign, putting an officer there to actually take enforcement action tends to work better. The ones that are just put there forever, people get used to them.
Yeah. So that would be your recommendation if we're gonna do something like that, is to post it randomly, I mean, use it randomly?
Exactly. That's how it seems to work in the other parts of the city. We recently acquired one of the small electronic signboards that are mounted in various locations. There's brackets that are mounted below the speed limit signs, so they're rechargeable. We can take them and charge them, put them there for a couple days, and then move them to other areas, and then sporadically put an officer, or preferably motorcycle patrol, to sit down the street from it and actually enforce the sign, because some people see the signs and then when they get used to not having a police officer follow up with it, it doesn't seem to be as effective.
Are we using any of that on Scenic Road right now?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
That's something we could,
That would be easy to accomplish, wouldn't it?
yeah, I mean, currently.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some brackets up there, but I don't think it's been currently used.
Okay.
If I may,
Sure.
I think sometimes, Chief, drivers don't realize how fast they're going. So it's not so much you're concerned about slowing down because you think there might be a police officer there that would pull you over. It reminds us that we're going faster than we realize, and we address it accordingly. So, I mean, I like the idea of the possibility of a permanent sign there, just to remind people, and you can still set up your periodic enforcement of it as well. But I don't know what the cost associated was to mount one there, and to, are they can you find them that are solar charged, and does that make sense to them, or
I think
not?
there are some units that are totally solar charged, yeah. We can certainly research that.
I would submit to you, Counselor, that a lot of the people that are speeding up there, that they're talking about, couldn't care less what the speed limit is. Therein lies a large part of the problem.
I wouldn't be surprised, Counselor. You know, I'm just talking about myself. I don't ride a motorcycle, but when I see that flashing in my face, I
agree.
The light goes off in my own head saying, you know, you're going a lot faster than you think.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Chief, I think some form of saturation going forward on a regular basis. I mean, it doesn't have to be daily, but certainly once or twice a week, if we could get a car to spend some time there in conjunction with these signs, I think it would help quite a bit. The other part of the problem is the noise, and I know that's not as easy. I believe, and the august counselor may correct me, but I believe you're not allowed to set up checkpoints for sound. But it doesn't mean if you hear a loud bike, you can't stop it for that purpose. It doesn't have to be any other.
Yeah, the law does not permit us to stop a motorcycle based on noise alone.
Just on
It's a secondary violation.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
it's pretty well settled.
I just hope we can tell these folks we're going to increase coverage up there, and not some sort of, we'll do it for the next 30 days or whatever, but rather a more routine movement towards enforcement in that area. I think that will go a long way, particularly at night. I think if we have a car up there at night, making themselves seen, perhaps making car stops, blue lights have a way of checking people's speed quicker than signs will. or at least it does mine anyways. I'd like us to be able to say to folks, they're going to see more of your guys.
Yeah, we can certainly make a concerted effort to do that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Wes, any thoughts on doing some kind of a painted curve or warning thing on the street versus just something different to, you know, as we all say, we get immune to signs, we get immune to whatever, but if something's on the road is a little different color, does it catch your, does it
We
get your
could
attention?
paint, we could paint something there. I'm just not sure. The problem, for a person who's going 30 miles an hour, they'll see it. For a person who's going 60 miles an hour, unless we put it way in front, it's not going to mean much. And if you put it too far in front, then it's not going to mean much either, so,
And in wet weather, it could be a problem.
well, right,
What, for being seen?
Seen.
Or just being,
no,
Driving on.
right. Yeah, I'd be more worried about motorcycles for that, because we'd have to paint it in the middle versus cars that are coming around.
just a thought?
Yeah.
Those of us who no longer ride bikes aren't quite as concerned.
Okay. Well, any other comments?
Any of you folks, even if it's a redundant comment, if you'd like to say something, now's the time.
One additional comment.
Please.
You talked about the sign with the flashing. There is a new one that was put down there on Weirs Beach, and it has made a bit of a difference. Now granted, when you're in the weekend, it's getting later on at night, sometimes it doesn't, but we've seen a little bit of a difference of what's been coming over the hill. So that's been helpful. So that's in support of what that sign could do. And I think the police presence, just before Bike Week, there was a patrol car that sat in one of our parking lots down by what we call Kayak Cove. And just that car being there,
Maybe.
watching the car slow down, and then the word got out to the other bikers. So they started going out on Route 3. So that did make a difference.
I think the chief's commitment should go a long way towards helping you.
Anything else?
My name's Dave Tatro, and I live at 618 Scenic Road. And I understand your point that Scenic Road's been used all these years for a pass-through for motorcycles to go, and a good scenic road for them to drive on. But the residential properties have been approved by the city, and it's a different area now than it was 10 or 15 years ago. It's much more busy, much more busy with people walking on the road, going over to Kayak Cove, and I think things have changed in that respect for the city.
I agree. Things have changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years in terms of what goes on in that neighborhood and along Scenic Road. And I think they've changed for the better. That's my opinion on it. So I don't want you to think that that your voice doesn't matter, because it does.
Right, thank you.
In terms of how we go about trying to work a resolution to this in a way that's compatible with the law, and hopefully answers some of your frustrations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joyce Pulaski. I'm also at 616 Scenic Road. I have two other issues, and one is the graffiti on the roads and what that says about our community. Anyone looking at it would go, what are all these black marks on the road? And the second thing is, I was wondering if cameras couldn't be used. For example, Friday night, 6 o'clock, I'm eating dinner, and there is a motorcyclist making a black mark up the street. It must have gone on for 100 feet, as well as his riding back, I don't know what you call it, back on his bike. But anyway, graffiti and use of cameras. I think something like that could easily be addressed too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to be heard? Any other comments from the committee?
I appreciate you all coming in. I mean that sincerely, and I appreciate the spirit in which you've spoken tonight. I feel a combination of signage, perhaps an electronic sign, and the chief offering to increase patrol in that area should help. As someone pointed out, when there's a cruiser parked there, it tends to dampen their spirits. So we'll work with the chief to see if we can't make sure he has the resources to help him get you some extra coverage. Okay?
As long as we're speaking of cameras, is there any prohibition for private homeowners setting up their own cameras? I'm not sure what the answer to that question is. And two, if we were to consider it, what would be the cost of it? Do we have any idea?
So I'm not an attorney, but I don't believe there's any prohibition of private cameras being there. In fact, a lot of times you'll hear in police investigations that the police department is asking any businesses or property owners in the area if they've got surveillance footage to assist. So I
Well,
don't believe we've got any prohibition on private cameras there. As far as putting a permanent camera there, the city does own some that we move around to various spots as needed, where we might have some challenges or issues going on. I know we just recently purchased a few of those, Chief. Do you remember the cost? Was it? I would say $12,000 to $15,000 a piece. So to have one permanently mounted there, then it's a matter of, going back and reviewing it and getting notification of time. So if we're not in the area and something happens, I don't want to tell you that the chief or his staff has time just to be watching hours of it. It might be something that if someone in the neighborhood heard something above and beyond, they could note a date and a time if there were a camera there, but they are pricey, and not to say that we couldn't find a location to put it there at various times. I don't know that we would look to mount one there permanently, but we could certainly
I guess my
discuss
my
options.
question would be, I mean, if we're going to do some kind of monitoring on a more regular basis, and we're considering using what I'll call the speed warning lights on a random basis in the neighborhood, can you set up a camera there just randomly and like kick it off at 6 o'clock at night when everybody's sitting down to have dinner? Or something like that, or is that a little more complex?
Why don't I take all these suggestions, the permanently mounted sign, having cameras, looking at some different things, additional permanent signage, work with the various department heads you've heard from tonight and come back with an approach of how we would recommend addressing it. And I don't know that it has to be back to a committee
I don't
level,
think it
but I
needs
think
that.
we can just bring it back and I can report it out to the council during a city manager report. That way everyone's getting the information, and then we can certainly take some feedback in direction there. And I know the chief would certainly also, be able to identify to me monthly, how many extra patrols were in the area, or how many were, an extra car sitting there doing some kind of radar detection or that type of stuff as well. So we can certainly kind of give you hours and vehicles that are above and beyond in that area as well.
Well, the season's kind of winding down, not that these problems are going to wind down completely and you're not going to continue to have them, but the season is kind of winding down. So I just want to make sure that you understand that at least my recommendation and what the committee recommends to the council, and I think the council's view of this will be to make this a project that doesn't stop in October of this year, but that we really focus on it for the next upcoming season. So I want you to understand that this is not like you're here, the recommendations are done, see you year after next. That's not what we're going to do.
Well, even though the city, even though the year's winding down, the fact is we've got some events scheduled down there coming up, so it'd be great if we had some extra patrols or extra monitoring, just to make sure we can preserve a quality of life for those folks.
Point well taken. Anything further? Okay, so what's your pleasure, folks? What kind of recommendation do we send on to the council?
Well, if I may, I think the manager's suggestion that they review what we've talked about here tonight, give us some options, cost-wise and manpower-wise and whatever, and then I think we can make a recommendation to the council. I don't think that should take a great deal of time.
I think that the manager's right. I don't think this needs to come back to committee again. I think we can just
Go right.
get the recommendations, get the report from the city manager, and go right back to council with it.
We can start working on this, and we can have something for you for the next meeting.
Okay.
Could you?
And one more thing, that doesn't mean that the chief couldn't or wouldn't start extra
Doing it right
patrols
now.
and whatever sooner than that, but we will certainly provide a more formal update, but we will get on this and have those conversations sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Could we get those, the committee get those before the
Absolutely, absolutely.
council meeting? Thank you.
Okay. Does everybody agree with that approach? I'm not hearing any dissenters.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess that's as succinct as we need to be, and if there's no further business coming before the committee, I'll adjourn it.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you coming.